So welcome to today's session on, we're calling it From Chaos to Clarity, and how to finally deliver cloud cost visibility to the CFO and your business. It'd be interesting to know at the end, we can talk about what kind of industries you guys are in. We've got some time at the end here to go through some Q&A if there's any questions, but looking forward to getting through today's session. I do want to keep it interactive, so feel free to chime in if there's any topics that as I'm going through that resonate with you. I'm Craig Slack, the CTO and founder of Envero. Envero is an IT service provider born in the cloud. We focus on Microsoft Azure, and that's our claim to fame, is helping companies with everything to do with public cloud relating to the Microsoft stack. So Azure is our core competency. Today's agenda, we're going to cover off a number of things. We're going to give an overview of what FinOps is. Some of you may or may not know what FinOps is in general. So we're going to give an overview there so we're all talking the same language. And we're going to cover off FinOps framework if you're not familiar with that. Also going to talk about some real world examples, what Envero has seen in the market and what challenges we've seen customers and different organizations facing. And then we want to cap it off with talking about FinOps maturity, what that's all about, and talk about some next steps. So hopefully that's what you guys signed up for, and this will be a good session for you.
And how can I manage this business if no one can predict the cloud costs? I don't think they understand how much this is actually costing us.
They view it as IT's budget problem, not their own.
Look, the cloud costs are rising, and it's your responsibility.
But I have no control over the workloads being created.
Does this sound familiar? These comments, these were AI generated videos, but the idea being, IT is on the hook for cloud spend. The business is pointing the finger at the CIO or directors of IT, whoever's in charge. There's a line item on the IT budget for cloud spend, and it keeps growing. The business doesn't have any understanding of, or accountability, I should say, to the spend that they're driving. So I'm going to jump to a poll here because I'm going to just pop up a poll on your screen to ask which of these statements resonate with you. So it'll pop up and we'll kind of get everybody's answers here. Struggling to quantify ROI, being asked to defend rising cloud costs, struggling to predict, very, very common things. You're not alone. Definitely, this is what we see in the industry. So there's a common thread, companies struggling to understand and grapple with what the cloud spend is. And where it really stems from is the challenge between responsibility and accountability. So responsibility, in terms of the context of IT budgeting, the responsibility of IT is to provide services to the business, and the business has demands that require some sort of technology. So IT has an obligation to perform those duties and provide those services. So IT has that responsibility. However, is IT accountable for the return on investment? So what are the outcomes, expected outcomes of that spend? So is there some sort of return on investment that's going to be achieved by spending more or growing your cloud environment? So that is the challenge there for the IT teams, is they have the responsibility and they are being held accountable, but they really have no ability to direct that spend. So they have the responsibility without accountability, but they're being held accountable regardless. And what this does is it creates frustration in the CIOs and IT leadership. They feel powerless, and they try many different things, cost optimization exercises, so on and so forth. And what it does, it just seems like it's a futile effort. So this is where many IT organizations sit today, as they're kind of feeling lost and not sure how to grapple with this. So I'm going to be referencing an organization called FinOps Foundation quite often in today's session. And this is because they are an open source organization, not for profit, and they are funded by all the big public cloud providers, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and others, as well as large enterprises. So they are basically putting all of their knowledge out to the internet, to the public domain, for what they're finding is best practices, and they've built this framework, which I'll talk about later. But they do this annual report. It's called State of FinOps, and they publish it annually. And this is from a recent one where they're finding that 57% roughly of organizations are finding that there's more and more attention at an organizational level of what IT spend is, and specifically cloud. So getting that granularity and being able to communicate out what that spend is, accuracy of forecasting. So this is a big challenge, and that was one of the ones that was responded to in the survey there. And then also an expectation that we're going to be sticking to the budget. So you set a budget at the beginning of the year for IT, and there's an expectation from the business that we're going to be able to stay true to that. Another little stat here from the State of FinOps report is companies are investing more and more in tooling. So yes, organizational alignment is still the number one, but what's happening is because there's a problem here and now, forecasting is not consistent. Companies are now going out trying to find solutions, and they're investing in tools. And the year-over-year increase here is 20%. That's a significant increase in companies that are investing in tooling. But I'm here to tell you, tools, they are just a band-aid. They do not solve the problem, the underlying problem of why cloud spend is growing, why you're not able to attribute value to the organization when that spend goes up. The CFO might ask a question, well, we increased our spend by $50,000 from last month. What was the metric that we're seeing on the front end that, are we increasing revenue, increasing customer satisfaction? That is not part of that. A tool is not going to tell you that information. So a tool can make recommendations on where to save money. It's going to identify resources that may be over provisioned. It will identify cost saving opportunities such as reserved instances or buying capacity in advance. But it's ultimately not going to get to the root cause, which is the business drivers. So what's happening? Companies are, as I said, spending money on tooling. And FinOps Foundation has found that the average number of tools companies have to manage their cloud spend is 4.1, which that seems mind-boggling to me even. And I've been working in cloud since 2009, so 16 years. But what it is companies are using the native tools. So that's the largest portion. So there's going to be in Azure, there's Azure Cost Management, AWS has Cost Explorer, so on and so forth. Obviously, that's a good starting point. But then companies who are maturing in their cost management, they start finding that there's limitations to those built-in tools. So they might build some of their own homegrown tools or go and buy those FinOps platforms, third-party tools. And so significant investments are being made in tooling because there's a need for answers, and it's because the business is asking for those answers. So that's kind of the state of the nation right now. And I don't know if that resonates with yourselves. So I'm going to put up another poll here and see what the general sense is in terms of experience with tooling. Oh, it's impressive. You had success allocating costs to business units. That's great. I know maybe it's multiple of those answers fit, so maybe just pick the best one that fits for you. All right. So what's lacking here? Tools are just part of the three-legged stool here when it comes to anything with technology. You may have heard the people process technology analogy before. It comes up in DevOps quite often as well. Tools are essentially, from a technology standpoint, tools are the enabler of the people, and they're meant to just support the processes. So if from a FinOps perspective, if you don't have the people in place to manage this, and they're just reacting, or if you don't have the processes in place to govern your cloud spend, then your three-legged stool is going to fall over. The tool is not going to give you everything that you need. So think in terms of that, and I'm going to share some what we've seen in the market here. So Envero has been in this space for a very long time, and from the early days before there was even any first-party cost management tools built into the platform. So sharing with you what we see does not work. For example, IT holding all responsibility for cloud costs. So this is very common. Companies will have a line item on the IT budget that's cloud, whatever you want to call it, and that's being tracked, and you'll just see that that's continually growing, and that starts to raise questions when it gets to material amounts of money, and so it just becomes a bigger and bigger challenge for IT to manage that cloud spend. What else doesn't work? A lack of organizational awareness of what FinOps is, and whether you use the term FinOps or cost management or whatever, just having that awareness of what it is important, because oftentimes there will be demands put on IT that are outside of the purview of what IT is aware of in terms of the return on investment. So making that investment, the business is saying, okay, we need to go and buy this cloud service or implement this cloud service. But if the organization isn't aware of what that is going to drive in terms of spend, you may spend more than the return that's achieved. Not educating the organization on FinOps, or at least understanding, this is kind of back to the awareness of what FinOps is. So that's also important. Many organizations go down the manual cost optimization route. Even before investing in tools, there's ways to quickly identify where you're overspending in a manual fashion and making those changes. But really, this doesn't scale. And as your cloud spend grows, you need a solution that's going to enable you to scale. Being reactive. So many organizations don't have a plan to forecast or ability to predict where their spend is going to be. So they wait till the end of the month and the cloud bill comes, and they say, oh, gee, we grew by 10%. Well, where's that 10%? They have to drill into it, figure it out. So not having a process or governance in place to be able to real time identify anomalies when they occur. If somebody spins up a very expensive resource on the first of the month in the billing cycle, you won't find that out till the end of the month, and you may maybe get a real surprise. However, it's not all negative. There are things that we've seen that do work, and organizations are doing these things. So education, I talked about that on the previous slide, but this does drive buy-in. If you are providing training to the organization, giving them the understanding of what FinOps is or what it is around how to manage cloud spend properly, you'll then get that buy-in and understanding that there is some accountability to deliver results from a business outcomes perspective and return on investment. At least assigning one person or a portion of a person to be responsible for the FinOps function within your organization. So call it a FinOps practitioner, somebody who's leading the charge and taking the lead on FinOps in general. That is extremely important, because otherwise, if it's just left to the regular operations team to do it off the side of their desk, you will not be able to mature in this area. Establishing processes. So this is, again, back to the three-legged stool. Having the people in place is number one, and then also having the processes to be able to manage those cloud costs, track those costs, do some forecasting, budgeting, and then also that real-time anomaly detection that I talked about. And integrating with the FinOps processes into the entire software development lifecycle or deployment lifecycle. So when a new solution is being designed, its cost is being considered. So, it could re-architect a solution so it's going to be more cost effective based on the inputs and outputs of what the solution requires. Engineers often will over-engineer solutions because they want to make sure it's going to be performant or high scalability, high reliability. But if you question about, is this really required for the business and to achieve the outcomes, maybe there's a more cost-effective way. So if you can do that up front And then all the way through the deployment process is also going to help. And not just leaving it up to once it's in operations, then it's the operations team's responsibility. Tying in again with that design principle up front, what is the return on investment going to be? If a expected business outcome, a new solution that's being deployed onto the cloud is going to generate $1 million in productivity gains or revenue or whatever, but you're spending $10 million in cloud spend, that's not a good payback. So having that ability to be able to track and tie those outcomes to the spend. And then having some method of pushing those costs out or assigning them out. This could be the terms called show back or charge back, where you have an ability to at least carve out a portion of the spend and attribute it to business units, departments, or maybe even a specific project. This enables then to drive that accountability that we're all talking about here. So I've used the term FinOps, and I didn't check to see if everybody knows what FinOps is and what it means. Ultimately, it's an operational framework that you kind of embed within your IT organization to help the business achieve value for its cloud spend. So being able to, again, tie it to business outcomes or holding individual groups, people accountable for the spend that they are driving within the organization. So that's what FinOps is at a high level. So let me share with you just an illustrative example of how FinOps shows up in terms of how CFOs think about IT spend. So if we look at the old, and CapEx is not dead, but comparing CapEx to OpEx, how CapEx spend, a very idealistic view occurs. So the business is going to come to IT. A business says, hey, I have a need here, and maybe technology can provide a solution. So business goes to IT, and IT is going to say, yes, we approve this technology, or maybe they're going to help with the selection process, whatever it is. There's going to be some technology that's selected. Then some involvement of finance or procurement, whether it's, yes, that's in the budget or what have you. There's a confirmation that, yeah, we can proceed. Procurement may issue a PO to buy the technology. Then IT is going to implement it. Business is going to consume it, and then IT operates it. And this model was predictable because there was a fixed cost, or the cost of the project from a capital perspective was known, and then depreciated over whatever useful life of that asset is. And that's known from a finance. The CFO is going to look at it and say, okay, we know what this is going to have an impact on our P&L for the next X number of years. Now, compare that to the OpEx model from a cloud spending perspective. The business still identifies a need. IT is going to approve the technology, but guess what? Even IT or even the business, anybody with a credit card, can actually buy that technology and transact it, and that's where shadow IT comes in. And then IT may be implementing it, maybe the business is implementing it, but there's some sort of implementation. Then the business is going to consume and use that service. IT continues to operate it. And it's on the back end where the finance procurement is kind of receiving the bills, trying to reconcile this to the budget. Those bills are variable. It's hard to predict. And that's where it really becomes a challenge, is that those costs are variable, and it's because it's based on actual consumption. So if there's a spike in consumption from 1 month to the next, or one billing period to the next, that can really throw your whole budget off for the rest of the year. So that is the root of the challenge and why it's important to start considering FinOps. The one item that's missing on the right side versus the left is this budget approval. Now, every organization is different. There may be some budget approval processes built into how you enable cloud spend, limiting who can buy marketplace items, those sort of things. There are controls you can put in place. But just thinking in terms of a high-level idealistic viewpoint here, FinOps will actually give you more of that accountability. So at different stages here of approving the technology, buying it, implementing it, and then also operating it, because FinOps doesn't just happen at the front end when you're buying it and that budget approval, it also ongoing operationalization. So making sure that as the system is running, maybe there's certain times of the year or month when utilization is low and you can scale down the SKUs. So why is this so important to talk about? So ROI, I've been talking about here, tying it to business outcomes. Well, cloud costs, OpEx versus CapEx, as I just talked about, cloud spend is OpEx. So from the CFO's perspective, there's traditional CapEx expenditures, easy to predict, as I said. They've got the depreciation schedules, whereas you've got the OpEx cloud spend is more variable, and that makes it harder from an ROI perspective to track long-term value creation to that variable spend over a long term. There's lack of clear business context. So from a cloud perspective, cloud spend is captured in terms of compute, storage, you name it, and some sort of technical unit. But it's very difficult often to track that and tie that back to some sort of business outcome, such as revenue generation, customer satisfaction. So that's a challenge. The shared resource problem is that many cloud resources are shared resources that can be used by many applications, many departments. So how do you then attribute that cost to the various different departments? Think of like a Kubernetes cluster. You've got multiple teams that are maybe hosting applications in that, and how do you allocate all the costs when it's just one line item that says this is your Kubernetes cost on the bill? So the elasticity challenge, which is actually a plus in terms of cloud, can lead to, like, so you can add more scale and more capacity as required. This can lead to over provisioning. So many times we come across this all the time where resources are left on 24/7 when realistically they're maybe only needed 8 to 10 hours a day. There's over provisioning. So the legacy mindset of maximize the capacity just so that when the system needs it, it's there, leads to excess spend and loss or waste. Engineering and finance don't think of things the same way. Engineering often looks at it as, I want to make sure that this is optimized for speed and for uptime. It's going to be highly resilient, fault tolerant across the globe, all those sort of things. But if you tie that back to what is the business outcome and what does the business actually need, does that application need to run 24/7? So, that's an example, whereas finance is going to look at it as, how do we optimize these workloads for cost and efficiency? So that's a challenge. Soft ROI. So cloud brings many things to your environment that are not quantitative. So for example, faster time to market. What does that actually translate to? Improved productivity of your organization, greater resilience and scalability. Those are soft benefits of the cloud that cannot be tied directly to an ROI unless you have some ability to track it. I mentioned shadow IT earlier, and this decentralized spending makes it hard to track. So if anybody with a credit card can go and spin up a SaaS service, you've now increased your cloud spend, but the ability to track it and trace it back to outcomes makes it a challenge. And then there's gaps in the data. So the tooling I talked about earlier, but cost management can be a challenge, and to be able to predict and forecast where your spend is going to be. So bring it back to the topic, or at least the title of today's webinar is, bringing you towards clarity, from chaos to clarity. What are some of the things that CFOs or that you can do to answer these concerns that the CFO may have? Well, number one, adopt FinOps. This is going to drive a cultural change within your organization and bring that awareness of what cloud spend and accountability is all about. Being able to tag resources and tag where that spend is, so that from a reporting standpoint, you can show where that spend is being driven from. So if, say, the HR department has deployed a new application for payroll, and that's driving a specific amount of spend, you can attribute that back and show that, hey, HR has increased our spend by this much, and this is why. And so then HR has to be held accountable to explain why that payroll application in that example is worth spending that incremental cloud amount. Creating these business-centric dashboards. So it's not just IT having all the information to be able to say, this is what our cloud spend is, this is where we're going, making that more widely available so that the organization has that awareness and they see it happening in real time or near real time, and you can report on business unit level, project level, what have you. And this is maybe a little bit more challenging, but being able to show where the cloud has enabled you to avoid costs. So for example, CapEx costs, maybe there was a major data center refresh of hardware that was bypassed and you didn't have to do that because you were in the cloud and you've got that evergreen approach. And also those agility, those softer benefits I talked about earlier, being able to now show the CFO or show the business these are the benefits. So it's not just all about the cost. It's like, hey, we're getting these added benefits. And that forecasting discipline is important. It's a challenge, but it's definitely important because that will give the CFO the confidence when you're hitting your forecast that you've got it under control. So what kind of outcomes can you expect once you implement FinOps? Number one, greater visibility. So this is, having those company-wide dashboards or being able to provide that budgeting and forecasting to finance. Ultimately, that gives that confidence and visibility. Being able to make decisions based on the data that what the cloud spend is attributed to, what return on investment, what business outcomes there are being made. FinOps will also enable optimization, and not just from a cost perspective, but also workload optimization so that over-provisioning doesn't occur or you turn on resources only when they're required during the day, those sort of things. And ultimately, governance. FinOps there's a heavy component of governance, putting these policies in place, automating policy enforcement, and driving out that accountability to the individual owners who are creating that or driving that spend. So I talked about the FinOps Foundation. This is their graphic of their FinOps framework. You can access this at finops.org. It's publicly available. They offer all their information for free. There's also some free training and other resources on there. Very useful site. And Envero prescribes to the FinOps framework or FinOps Foundation in general because it's industry proven. It's constantly updated every year. They refresh the framework with what's changing. For example, this year they just rolled out AI specific FinOps practices and guidance. So it's ever evolving. It's not a stale and static environment. But what do most people think of when they're talking about FinOps or when they think about FinOps? They're thinking of understanding costs. So that's kind of the reporting piece. So you're getting your reporting. They also think about optimization. So most companies jump straight in and say, okay, we're going to optimize these workloads. We're going to buy these reserved instances or whatever. And then they kind of put tools down and they say, we're done. But the FinOps Foundation has actually identified 22 domains and capabilities that span way beyond just the optimization, cost optimization side of things. And I would argue that the most important and most valuable piece is this quantifying business value. So being able to forecast and budget is very important, but also unit economics enables you to say, for this incremental spend on cloud, we are getting this, incremental revenue or customer satisfaction or what have you. And then underlying all this, there are some FinOps practice minimums that you need to have and to be able to maintain this, but you don't have to jump all in. It may be daunting when you think there's 22 domains and capabilities that you have to tackle. And that's why we like to say FinOps is a journey. It's not a destination. You don't have to jump all in and say, okay, we're going to spend the next 6 months and be fully up and running with FinOps, or we're going to go and buy a tool and we're done. It is a journey, and you ultimately have to follow a crawl, walk, run methodology and start off small. And FinOps Foundation actually has a maturity definition for each of those 22 domains and capabilities. What it means to be at a crawl stage for each one, what it means to be a walk and run. But at a high level, at the crawl stage, which is where we see a lot of organizations are at, and that's just the nature of where the industry is at. But this is where you may have one or two people, there's like individuals who understand what FinOps is about or how to, establish some sort of FinOps practices, but they're very nascent and early stage. But the ideal here is you're setting your goals of where you want to go as an organization and how FinOps fits in with that. Then you can move into the walk stage, which is now a broader understanding shared across the IT department at the very minimum, and ideally beyond that into the business or separate groups with that are adjacent to IT. Driving that cost transparency and also allocation. So being able to show how that's each chunk of spend is attributed back to some sort of business outcome or business department. And it may, I think the number the FinOps Foundation says to be at the walk is just over 50%. Being able to allocate just over 50% of your cloud spend that's a really, really good mark to get to. And this can be done through a show back or charge back model, if you're familiar with those terms. Show back being you've got an ability to report and say, this is how much HR is driving, finance, whatever, however you want to split that out. Maybe it's, by individual department owners or whatever. And then charge back is actually more of a financial calculation and pushing it into your ERP so that it hits people's budget directly. So that again is much more mature. And then the run stage, we do not see any organizations today that are in the run stage across all 22 domains. They may be just bordering on the run side of things for one or two. But this is kind of where it should be your North Star. This is the litmus test of where you want to get to, but you may never actually achieve it, and that's okay. I think it is a journey to get there. And if you've heard the saying, how do you eat an elephant? Just one bite at a time. So start tackling bits and pieces and start developing your FinOps framework within your organization, FinOps practices specific to your organization. And FinOps Foundation provides a lot of those tools to help you figure out where to get started. Now I want to share some real world examples of where one specific example where we've helped an organization. So before they engaged in Vero, this is a utility provider, provincial in Canada here, provincial utility. They were spending over $10 million a year in the cloud. They had concerns over uncontrolled cloud costs. So much so that they were seeing 20 to 30% variability, and this is plus or minus, month to month. So I think in terms of they're spending over $1 million a month, this is $200,000 or $300,000 a month, plus or minus, from one month to the next. So they were completely out of control. So they would see the cloud spend spike one month, do some efforts to optimize, they would get it down another $200,000 or $300,000, and then the next month it'd be back up again. So it was a constant battle. And the business was asking the CIO to provide more clarity, and there was a lot of pressure being put on that person. And the CIO was turning to his team saying, we need answers, but the team didn't have any because the problem was there was too many people deploying workloads. They didn't have the controls in place, but you'd also, for a large organization, you don't want to put too many controls in place that is preventing that agility that the cloud enables. So you have to have some other methods of tracking that spend. They did spend, before we got involved, they had spent some time building their own custom reports. And they were able to attribute actually, or not attribute necessarily, but account for just under 50% of their cloud spend. So they weren't attributing it directly to the business, but they were able to identify what workloads were costing how much. And they did have one person who was in the FinOps practitioner role, but they had many other duties, and so they were doing FinOps really off the side of their desk. And they weren't sure where to start. They were aware of the FinOps Foundation and the framework there, but they didn't know where to start. It was very daunting for them. They felt kind of overwhelmed. So that's kind of leading into why they reached out for help. So after they engaged with Vero, this is where we got them to. I'm going to talk a little bit about our FinOps Ready, which is a maturity assessment that we have. It's a process that we take customers through to assess where they're at on the maturity scale. And ultimately, we got them the report that comes with this is like a 60-plus page report that identifies all the 22 capabilities and domains areas where they're at today and where they want to go, and help identify what the top 10 areas are, really the low-hanging fruit for them to achieve that the best ROI for investing in FinOps. We provided some broader education for FinOps, and so that one FinOps practitioner, we ran workshops that trained more than just the IT department. There were some business stakeholders as well that were included in those training sessions. So that gave that awareness on a broader scale. We pointed them in the direction of some FinOps certifications. Again, FinOps Foundation provides these. So that was some key employees needed to get certified there. We helped them with defining their reporting requirements. How did they want to gather that data and then report on it, provide that visibility at the organizational and higher level, as well as forecasting. And then we helped them select a tool. So they were, as I said, they had built this in-house tool previously, and we helped them select a third-party tool that was going to enhance and be able to enable their people and help to enforce the processes. Where they're at today, they're still working with us, and we're implementing what's called FinOps Quick Start, which is basically a FinOps in a box, and it's a packaged offering that we've put together that enables customers to get up and running right off the bat to a base level of FinOps. And it implements things like tagging, reporting, and so on. Just the bare minimum that most organizations don't have or will need at least to have some level of FinOps in place. And then we're helping them to operationalize this. And ultimately, we want to enable their internal team. We don't want them to be reliant on us longer term. So we like to work ourselves out of a job in that respect. So FinOps is a journey. Now, putting this back to yourself, where do you go from here, and how do you work on maturing your FinOps practices? So, first, I would recommend figure out where you are today. Do a current state review, and you can again use the FinOps Foundation as a starting point to understand all the areas you should assess, and then determine where do you want to go for each of those areas, so that you can identify the gaps. So if you know where you are today, you can then say, this is where we're going to go tomorrow, and then figure out how to bridge that gap. So how are you going to get there? Build that roadmap. Then you have to decide, do you have the skills in-house to do that? Do you need some help? Do you need to get some education, certification for your team? Then you're going to be just executing the plan. And again, this is a journey. This is not just flip a switch and you're running FinOps. It's going to be an ever-changing, always evolving, ever-maturing solution. So you mature your practices, and then it's just operationalized. So you may choose to set up a FinOps team, establish a FinOps practitioner, or what have you. However, we've seen some clients that struggle to get the skills or develop the team internally, or they want to get some help from Envero as they go along the way, and then they can become self-sufficient. So this is how we can help. We have this FinOps Ready assessment. As I said, we do this maturity assessment, and that covers the first 4 boxes there of the current state review, identifying the gaps to where you want to go, giving you the roadmap, and then providing that FinOps education, at least guidance on where to go. Then, if you choose to not execute that plan on your own, we can implement our FinOps Quick Start, or we can tailor a solution to help address specific needs to help mature your FinOps. And further, if you choose that you don't have the team or capabilities in-house to manage it, we have a managed service where we can take the whole FinOps off your hands. How long does this take? Well, the FinOps Ready is just a 2-week engagement. This includes running workshops with your team, gathering all the information in current state, setting up the gaps, and then producing the report. So this is a 2-week, very quick engagement. FinOps Quick Start, this is where you're going to get that buy-in from the business, driving visibility and accountability and reporting. That takes about 2 to 3 months. There's a bit more heavy lift on that effort. And then if you choose to go with FinOps as a service, there's 1 month to onboard, and then there's an ongoing service fee. So this is ultimately full service offering that Envero can provide. And we have customers that engage us at various different stages along the way. So what do you get out of the FinOps Ready as a maturity assessment? This is just the high-level summary, but there is a full 60-plus page report that accompanies with this. And you can see here that we've got, this is aligned to all the 22 domains and capabilities from the FinOps Foundation and their FinOps framework. And the blue bar identifies where you are today on a scale of 1 to 5 and where you want to go as the green bar. So we roll this up to an overall score and identify where you're at from a crawl, walk, and run. And you can then identify and set your business organizational goals and objectives to prioritize where you want to increase your score to achieve those return on investment. And we provide that guidance to say, okay, here's maybe 100 recommendations, but here's the top 10 that are going to get you the quickest bang for your buck and biggest return on investment. So that's where we help, and that's a very quick engagement for, like I said, 2 weeks. And just to illustrate, this does align directly with the FinOps Foundation's framework, so you can see how it all ties together. So do you want to achieve your desired results? What is this going to help you get to? You're going to be able to map your cloud costs to business outcomes. You're going to, drive accountability out to the business for what the cloud spend is and show what that return on investment is. Having visibility, so having that reporting capability so that there's a cost-aware culture. That's a key cultural change, organizational change. Making decisions based off of data and not just gut instinct. Minimizing waste, that's the optimization side of things, not just for cost, but also for resource utilization. And maximizing value for what your dollars are spent. So cloud is expensive, and if it's not managed, it can get out of control. So being able to manage the value that the organization is getting is key. And the ability to answer budget-related questions. So the CIO is going to get asked questions from the CEO and CFO, and you can ultimately go back to the business and say, yes, cloud spend has been growing, but guess what? We've also been driving these additional business outcomes that have achieved greater revenue, greater productivity, what have you. There's various different reasons. So I'm going to leave you at the end here. Got a couple more slides. One more little funny video that kind of shows the final outcome here.
We're seeing a 30% cost reduction across all departments.
Here is where we are seeing the return on investment.
All right, we got 10 minutes left here or so. I'm going to open it up for questions, but if this sounds of interest, if you want to get that accountability out to your business, driving business results, tying it to outcome, you can email us at info@enverodigital.com, or you can scan that QR code there, and that will actually allow you to book a free call with us. So there's a booking link when you click on or you scan that QR code. It'll allow you to book and schedule a meeting with us, and we can talk about your specific needs and how either FinOps Ready, FinOps Quick Start might be a fit for you, or maybe there's some other questions that you want to ask that we'd be happy to have that conversation and no costing call for you. I will open it up to questions if you want to throw anything into the chat. So Bryce saying use the tool like frameworks. However, an automated tool would be interesting. Yeah, so that's where the FinOps Ready solution comes into play. So it's not an automated solution, but we do have it set up as a service that we can run for customers on a regular basis. So customers will typically run that every 6 months or a year to get a sense of what and be able to show the business where they're growing, or improving their maturity. Once the service is set up, are the dashboards automated? Yes, that's a great question, Bryce. So when we implement FinOps Quick Start, there's a full data pipeline that's built to extract all your billing data and then put it into standardized format. And we have these reports, dashboards that we provide that are automated and regularly updated. The frequency can be, up to you. Some organizations want daily updates. Other organizations are fine with monthly, but the reports do get updated automatically. All right, I'm just going to put one last question up. Is if you could give a rating out of 5 stars, how you think we did today, and if this information was useful for you. Appreciate the feedback. And don't hesitate to reach out. You've got our email address there. Somebody will get back in touch with you, either myself or somebody from the team. And we'd be happy to, like I say, if you can scan that QR code, book a meeting with you, and we can have a real conversation, dive deep into your specific areas.